The first time I realized my mother thought grief was a business opportunity, she was standing in my grandmother's rose garden wearing pearl earrings and telling a stranger where the guest cottages would probably go. My grandmother had been dead for 12 days. I was still in black, still sleeping in the upstairs room with the slanted ceiling because I couldn't make myself leave the estate yet. Still waking up at dawn to the smell of old cedar and lemon polish and the faint sweetness from the climbing roses outside the window. The house had always made me feel anchored, safe, like old money without the arrogance, like discipline with lace curtains. My grandmother, Eleanor Vale, built her life that way. Everything looked soft until you tested it. That morning, the air was warm already, and the gravel drive was crowded with unfamiliar cars. And not neighbors, not family friends bringing casseroles or condolences late because they lived out of town. These were polished SUVs and one black town car with a dealership plate frame still on it, clean tires, men in tucked-in shirts, women holding leather folios. I stood on the upstairs landing and listened before I came down. My mother's voice floated through the foyer, bright, social, a little louder than it needed to be. The orchard line starts past that stone wall, she was saying, and the main house sits on just under 11 acres by itself, but the whole property is much bigger if someone wanted to split it. Someone wanted to split it. My hand tightened on the banister so hard the carved wood pressed crescents into my palm. I took the stairs slowly, not because I was afraid, but because when you walk into a room already knowing you're being lied to, speed only helps the liar. At the bottom, I could see them through the open French doors. My mother in cream slacks and a pale blue blouse, looking freshly pressed and composed, not like a woman who had spent the last week telling everyone how devastated she was. My stepfather, Richard, stood near the fountain with both hands in his pockets, wearing that smug half-smile he used whenever he was certain someone else would be cleaning up his decisions. And with them were three strangers, one of them a broad man with a silver hair and a tan that looked expensive. The silver-haired man was nodding as my mother gestured toward the back lawn. "Yes," she said, "the stables are old, but the land is the real value. The land is the real value." It not the house where my grandmother taught me how to write thank you notes with a fountain pen before I was 10, and not the library with the navy wallpaper and brass ladder, not the long dining room table with a cigarette burn on the underside from 1978 that she never fixed because, in her words, memory mattered more than perfection, just value. My heel clicked against the tile as I stepped into the foyer. Every head turned. My mother's smile faltered for half a second, that was all. Then it came right back, brighter than before. "Camille," she said, like she was pleasantly surprised to see me in my own grandmother's house. "You're awake." It was such a ridiculous thing to say that for a second I almost laughed. "I wasn't aware I needed permission to be," I said. The silver-haired man glanced from me to her. My mother recovered quickly. "No, this is my daughter, Camille." Daughter, not stepdaughter to Richard, not Eleanor's granddaughter, just daughter, as if blood alone explained my place here and therefore limited it. The man offered his hand. "Julian Harrow." I didn't take it. His hand hung there, one beat too long before he lowered it with professional grace. "Who are you?" I asked. My mother gave a tiny exhale through her nose, the one she used when she wanted an audience to know I was being difficult. "Mr. Harrow is a development consultant." I looked at the other two, a woman with a clipboard, a younger man taking photos with a tablet. "Why," I asked, "is a development consultant walking the property before my grandmother's memorial?" Silence settled over the garden. Even the fountain seemed suddenly too loud. And Richard shifted his weight and gave me a look that was supposed to be paternal but never quite reached believable. "Let's not start." That phrase had followed me for most of my life in that family. Let's not start, meaning, let's not ask obvious questions. Let's not embarrass the adults by noticing what they're doing. Let's not ruin a lie while it's still getting dressed. I kept my eyes on my mother. She folded her hands at her waist, calm, refined, practiced. "We are exploring options." "For what?" "The property." I stared at her. Behind me, somewhere in the house, the grandfather clock in the hall began to chime 10. Each strike sounded formal, almost judicial. I said, "Grandmother has been dead less than 2 weeks." "And that," my mother said coolly, "is exactly why practical matters cannot wait forever." There it was, not grief. As administration, management, the family religion. I stepped fully into the sunroom threshold and looked past her at the lawn. The grass had just been cut yesterday by the groundskeeper my grandmother had kept on payroll for almost 30 years. The hedges were trimmed. The hydrangeas had started to bloom in pale blue clusters under the side windows. Everything looked maintained, tendered, still loved. My chest felt tight, but my voice came out clean. What exactly are you exploring? Richard answered before she could. Your mother and I are reviewing a possible sale. Possible sale. I heard the words, but my mind rejected them at first, not because they were confusing, because they were obscene. You're reviewing a sale, I repeated. My mother gave a patient nod. Yes, of her house. Our family property, she corrected. As I looked at her so long that the woman with the clipboard glanced down at her shoes. No one in that garden knew how dangerous my mother's calm voice could be if you'd grown up under it. She could make theft sound sensible, cruelty sound mature, exclusion sound administrative. I said, on what authority? That changed the room. Julian Harrow stopped pretending he was only there to admire the roses. Richard's jaw shifted once, and my mother's eyes hardened in a way most people never caught, because they were distracted by the rest of her face. Camille, she said, don't make this ugly. That line almost made me smile. People only say don't make this ugly when they've already started. My grandmother died 12 days ago, I said. The estate hasn't been read. Nothing has gone through court. So I'll ask again. Yes, on what authority are you showing her property to developers? Richard's voice sharpened. Watch your tone. I turned to him. You don't have one with me. He actually took a step forward, then stopped when Julian Harrow discreetly moved his gaze away. Funny how fast men like Richard remember public manners when another man with money is present. My mother laid a hand on Richard's arm, not to soothe him, but to signal control. She always liked doing the containing. It made her feel superior. There is no need for dramatics, she said. As Eleanor's only child, I am handling her affairs. It was a beautiful sentence, elegant, simple, almost true. And almost true is where people like my mother do their best work. I said, handling her affairs is not the same thing as selling her home. My mother smiled again. But you were always sentimental about this place. That landed exactly the way she intended, not as an observation, as a reduction, sentimental, emotional, attached, therefore less rational, therefore less qualified. I should explain something. I'm not a woman people usually describe as sentimental. I'm 36. I'm a forensic accountant. I've spent most of my professional life tracing money through shell companies, divorce proceedings, fraudulent nonprofits, and family-owned businesses that treated taxes like a suggestion. I notice patterns. I notice timing. I notice when someone is trying to widen a doorway before they carry out the furniture. But my grandmother was the one person in my family who never treated those qualities like a personality defect. When I was 16, she told me, then people will accuse a woman of being cold the moment she starts being accurate. I thought of that now as I looked at my mother standing in the garden pretending a property tour was a normal part of mourning. I'm going to need more than broad statements, I said. Who contacted him? Julian Harrow gave a diplomatic cough. Perhaps this is a conversation for the family. I finally looked at him directly. He had that sleek, careful confidence certain men develop after decades of profiting from other people's transitions. Divorce, death, insolvency, rezoning. He probably told himself he was just a facilitator. People with clean shoes often do. It is, I said, which is why I'm asking why you're in it. His expression tightened by 1 degree. My mother gave a small laugh, as embarrassed on my behalf in that performative way she had perfected by the time I was 9. Please excuse my daughter. She's had a hard time processing all this. I almost said something cruel. Instead, I let her sentence hang between us until the younger man with the tablet pretended to recheck a photo. Then I said very calmly, no. What I'm having a hard time processing is why you're acting like you inherited a hotel. Richard muttered, Jesus Christ. My mother's face cooled. That is enough. No, I said. Enough would have been waiting until after the memorial to start marketing the place where she was buried from. That stung. I could tell because my mother's chin lifted half an inch. Your grandmother is not buried here, she said. And the fact that she corrected the literal detail instead of the meaning told me I had finally hit something real. Julian Harrow looked at his watch. Polite, discreet, ready to leave if the family became inconvenient enough. Good. My mother saw it too, and suddenly her patience thinned. We are not discussing legal details in the garden, she said. Then where? I asked. Because you seem very comfortable discussing square footage in the garden. Richard stepped in then, his voice hard. You are a guest here right now, Camille. Remember that. The entire world seemed to still. A guest. In the house where my grandmother taught me how to swim in the South Pond. In the house where I stayed every summer after my parents divorced. So then every winter after my mother married Richard, and suddenly every room in our life smelled like his cigars and his opinions. In the house where my grandmother quietly paid part of my college tuition when my mother said I'd appreciate it more if I took out loans. A guest. I looked at him, and when I answered, even I heard the temperature change in my own voice. That was a stupid thing to say out loud. My mother's eyes flashed. Camille. Julian Harrow shifted back a step. The woman with the clipboard looked like she wanted to evaporate. Richard gave a short, humorless laugh. There it is, that attitude. That's why your mother didn't want you involved. I turned to her. Involved in what, exactly? She didn't answer. That was answer enough. I felt something inside me settle, not soften, not break, settle, like dust after impact. Like a drawer sliding shut. My grandmother had a phrase for this too. When the truth shows itself, don't blink first. So I didn't. Instead, I said, I want to see the estate paperwork. My mother stared at me as if I'd asked to inspect her bloodstream. There is no reason for that. There is every reason for that. Richard cut in. The lawyers are handling it. Which lawyers? He opened his mouth and closed it again. A small silence followed, almost delicate, the kind that tells you more than an argument does. I turned back to my mother. What firm? Her voice came out clipped. Why are you interrogating me? Because innocent people answer simple questions. Because the estate of a woman like Eleanor Vale did not move this fast without either strong planning or bad intentions. But because my grandmother never once in her life described my mother as capable with paperwork. Charming, yes. Determined, yes. Socially gifted to the point of danger, absolutely. But capable with paperwork? No. And because 3 months before she died, when I brought her tea in the library, after one of her specialist appointments, she had asked me a question that felt strange at the time. If anything ever gets untidy after I'm gone, she said, eyes on the rain outside the windows, will you look at the numbers before you look at the tears? I had laughed softly. That's a very specific warning. It's a very specific family, she said. I remembered that now with brutal clarity. I'm asking because this feels untidy already, I said. My mother's mouth flattened. Julian Harrow cleared his throat. Perhaps we should continue this another day. Yes, I thought, please go tell someone else that grief creates development opportunities. But before he could turn, my mother spoke too quickly. No, there's no need to overreact. We're nearly done here. Nearly done here, as if I were a weather delay. I looked at the younger man with the tablet. Delete every photo you took. He blinked at me. I'm sorry. You heard me. Richard's voice rose. You do not get to give instructions here. I ignored him. Delete them. The young man looked helplessly at Julian Harrow, who looked at my mother, who finally let the elegance drop. For God's sake, Camille, she snapped. Stop behaving like a child. There it was, the oldest tool in her box. Belittle, diminish, reframe my objection as immaturity instead of threat. I stepped out into the garden then. Fully the gravel path, warm under my shoes. Close enough to smell my mother's perfume, something floral and expensive and too bright for morning. No, I said quietly. What I'm doing is noticing that you brought outsiders onto an unsettled estate and started discussing a sale before the family has even had the formal reading. Julian Harrow went still. He knew that word. Unsettled. My mother did too. I saw it in the quick movement of her throat. I kept my eyes on her and asked the question that mattered most. When was the reading scheduled? She said nothing. Richard said, That's private. My gaze shifted to him, not from family. He gave me a look full of contempt. You always think you're smarter than everyone else. I almost answered yes, but that would have wasted time. Instead, I said, Was it scheduled? Another beat of silence. And then my mother said, There were delays. By whom? Administrative ones. That's not an answer. It's the answer you're getting. I looked at Julian Harrow. I assume you were told title would be clear. He hesitated, which meant yes. Interesting, I said. My mother's face changed then. It wasn't panic. She was too disciplined for that. It was irritation, sharpened by the realization that this had stopped being manageable. Camille, she said, lower now, you live in Chicago. You have your own life. You're not here day to day. You don't understand what it costs to maintain a place like this. There it was, the practical woman's speech, expenses, burdens, reality, all the little words greedy people use when they want to sell something that isn't fully theirs. I said, "Try me." Richard laughed under his breath. Yet you couldn't afford the heating bill in this place. That one actually amused me. He had no idea what I made, no idea what I owned, no idea how much of my life had been shaped by the private pleasure of letting men underestimate me until documents arrived. But I didn't correct him. Numbers are more useful when they arrive on paper. My mother saw the smile touch my mouth and mistook it. "This isn't a fight you're going to win," she said softly. "My grandmother used to trim dead blooms from the roses with a pair of silver shears and tell me the same thing about rot. If you catch it early, it only costs you the branch." I looked around the garden, at the stone path, the fountain, the hedge maze my grandfather planted for no good reason, except that Eleanor once admired one in an English magazine. At the house itself, a white painted brick glowing in the sun, all those windows reflecting sky like they had nothing to hide. Then I looked back at my mother. "Win?" I said. "I haven't started." That made the woman with the clipboard flinch. Julian Harrow stepped back and buttoned his jacket. "Mrs. Vale, perhaps we should revisit this when the estate matters are fully resolved." Mrs. Vale, not Mrs. Ashford, Richard's name, Eleanor's name. My mother still used it socially because it carried more weight. I wondered if he knew that or if he was just following the stationery. My mother turned to him with a tight smile. "This is a misunderstanding." "I'm sure," he said, in the tone of a man who was no longer sure of anything except wanting distance. "Good again." The younger man lowered his tablet. The woman closed her folio. Little signs of retreat. But my mother saw the deal beginning to cool, and her anger turned toward me in a way only daughters really recognize. Not rage, not even hatred. A kind of personal offense that you existed outside the role assigned to you. She said, "You have always made things harder than they need to be." I answered, "Only for people doing things the wrong way." Richard stepped closer, low and threatening now that the strangers were halfway gone. "Back off." "No." The word came out so flat that even he paused. I'd spent years learning that the calmest voice in the room usually controls its memory afterward. Julian Harrow extended a hand to my mother again, this time only as farewell. "We'll wait to hear from counsel." Not from her, from counsel. That landed hard. My mother's face stayed composed, but I saw the small pulse at the side of her neck. And as the three strangers headed toward the drive, the gravel crunching under expensive shoes, my mother turned on me fully. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I watched the cars rather than her. "Protecting evidence?" That made Richard scoff. "Evidence of what?" I looked at him. "You tell me." He went red in patches, another bad sign for him. Men like Richard always think confidence substitutes for precision until someone starts using legal nouns around them. My mother crossed her arms. "You are being hysterical." That word, predictable, lazy, gendered, she always used it when calm had stopped working on me. I said, "You invited developers onto the property before the estate reading. You still haven't named the firm handling probate. You just told a third party this place could be split. If you want me less suspicious, young, you should have been less obvious." Richard barked, "This is between your mother and her inheritance." I turned my head slowly toward him. "My inheritance," I said, "is not a topic you should ever try to define for me." He looked genuinely startled. Good. He should have been. My mother's voice came out soft again, the dangerous version. "Eleanor owed you nothing, Camille. There are certain sentences that don't hurt in the normal way. They clarify." The wind moved through the rose bushes, carrying that green, peppery scent they get in summer. Somewhere a sprinkler clicked on, near the east lawn. I thought about my grandmother sitting at the breakfast table in winter, with her reading glasses low on her nose, signing checks herself because she trusted almost no one with final review. I thought about the locked drawer in the library desk, or the banker's boxes in the downstairs study closet. The way she'd started asking me, quietly, about fiduciary terms during the last year of her life, as if she were testing whether I still understood them outside a courtroom. And I thought about the sentence my mother had just chosen: "Eleanor owed you nothing. Not she loved you. Not this is complicated. Not I know you're hurting too. Just debt, obligation, transaction." I said, "You're right. She didn't owe me anything." My mother held my gaze, maybe expecting that to break me open. Instead, I added, which means if she gave me something, she meant to. For the first time that morning, she looked unsure. It only lasted a second, but it was there. Richard covered it quickly with bluster. You're not entitled to this house. I let the silence answer him for a beat. Then I said, "What an interesting choice of word." My mother snapped, "Stop doing that." "Doing what?" "Talking like everything is a cross-examination." That almost got a real smile out of me. "Then stop giving testimony." Richard swore under his breath and started toward the house. My mother stayed where she was. The fountain splashed behind her. The roses moved in the wind. She looked polished and expensive and deeply, deeply irritated. When she finally spoke again, her voice had lost all warmth. "Let me save you some embarrassment," she said. "Whatever fantasy you've built around this house, it's over. Eleanor was practical in the end." Practical in the end, meaning sick enough to influence, tired enough to pressure, old enough to revise. That's what she wanted me to hear. I stepped closer. Close enough that she had to lower her chin slightly to keep eye contact. A tiny detail, but in families like mine, power often lives in tiny details. "Then I'll be very interested to read exactly how practical she became," I said. Her expression chilled. "You won't." It was the first honest thing she'd said all morning. I nodded once, as if she had confirmed something useful. "Thank you." "For what?" "For telling me there's something to hide." I left her standing there. I didn't storm out, didn't slam a door, didn't make a speech. I walked back through the sunroom, through the foyer, past the grandfather clock and the silver bowl on the entry table, and the portrait of Eleanor at 32 looking like she'd already outlived several fools. Upstairs, I shut the bedroom door quietly and stood in the center of the room until my breathing evened out. Then I did what I always do when someone lies to my face with property involved. I sat down at the old writing desk by the window, opened my laptop, and started making a list. Dates, visitors, statements made, parties present, potential firms, county records, estate filing status. I could still smell the roses through the screen. My hands were steady now. That should have frightened them more than if I'd cried. I searched the county probate docket first. Nothing under Eleanor Vale. Nothing under Eleanor Margaret Vale. Nothing under Eleanor M. Vale. No filing, no petition, no letters testamentary, no estate case. I checked again using the date of death filter, in case the clerk's office indexed her differently. Still nothing. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the screen while a slow, cold feeling moved down my spine. No filing meant no formal estate open yet. No formal estate meant no clean authority. And no clean authority meant one of two things. Either my mother was bluffing for leverage, or she was moving faster than the paperwork because she was afraid of what the paperwork would say. Both were useful. One was explosive. I opened a second tab and searched property records. The main parcel still showed in Eleanor's name. No transfer yet, no recorded listing docs either, which didn't mean much. Deals start whispering long before they start filing. Then I checked zoning overlays and development inquiries. Most people don't think to do that. I do. And there it was. As a pre-application conference request submitted 3 business days before my grandmother died. Submitted by a consulting group I didn't recognize. Attached parcel number, Vale House Estate. I stared at the screen until the letters seemed to sharpen. 3 business days before she died, not after. Before. That meant this wasn't grief moving too quickly. This was planning underway while my grandmother was still alive. I felt my jaw tighten. Then I remembered something else. 2 weeks before Eleanor died, I'd arrived early for one of my weekend visits and found my mother in the downstairs study, standing too close to the built-in file cabinets. She'd claimed she was looking for stationery for thank you notes. At the time, I thought it was odd, but not enough to confront. Now it slid into place like part of a mechanism. As I looked toward the bedroom door, the whole house felt different suddenly. Same walls, same rugs, same filtered summer light, but a different temperature, like a room after someone has taken the painting off the wall and left the hook. My phone buzzed on the desk, a text from my mother. "Please leave this alone for once." I looked at it for a long moment, not "can we talk," not "you're upset and I understand," not even "this is complicated, leave this alone, for once." as if silence had been my pattern, as if I hadn't spent half my life swallowing things to keep the peace she was always performing for strangers. I set the phone down without answering. Then I opened the Notes app again and typed one more line. Mother contacted development before death. And the room was quiet except for the ceiling fan and the distant murmur of Richard's voice downstairs. The kind of man who always sounds like he believes volume creates legitimacy. I got up, crossed to the closet, and looked at the top shelf. 3 banker's boxes sat in the back behind folded blankets. My grandmother's label maker had marked them in neat black letters years ago. House Personal Trust. The last one was locked with a small brass hasp. I stared at it, then very slowly I smiled. Because for the first time that morning, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was remembering. And once I remembered the locked box, I remembered the key. My grandmother never kept important keys where sentimental people would look first. She hid them where practical people would think she'd forgotten them. In plain sight, as inside things no one respected enough to inspect. I crossed to the bookshelf by the bed, reached behind a row of old gardening memoirs, and felt cold metal taped to the back panel. Still there, a tiny brass key. I held it in my palm and felt something shift all the way to the floor of me. Downstairs, I heard the front door shut. My mother, maybe, Richard following. Their voices faded toward the drive. Good. I went back to the closet, pulled the trust box forward, and slid the key into the lock. It turned easily, too easily, as if my grandmother had expected one day I would need to do exactly this. Inside were folders, cream-colored, tabbed, ordered, not dramatic. My grandmother hated dramatic paperwork. If she meant to blow someone's life apart, she preferred to do it in alphabetical order. As I lifted the first folder and saw the heading typed in dark blue ink across the tab, Successor Materials, my pulse changed, not faster, sharper. Under that was another file. Correspondence, S. Hale. And below that, a sealed envelope with my name written across the front in my grandmother's hand. Not Camille, darling, not sweetheart. Camille Ashford Vale, my full name, the formal version, the version she used when she wanted a sentence to carry weight. The late morning light had shifted gold across the carpet by then. Dust moved in it slowly. The room smelled like old paper and lavender sachets and summer heat pressing softly against the windows. I sat on the floor with the envelope in my hand and knew, with a certainty so deep it almost felt like calm, that whatever my mother thought she was selling, she had made one catastrophic mistake. She had assumed my grandmother left behind a house. She had not considered that Eleanor Vale might have left behind instructions. And in my family, instructions were where the real wars began. I slid my finger under the seal. The paper inside wasn't long. That was the first thing that struck me. People expect important things to come in thick stacks. Legal language, paragraphs that feel heavy enough to justify the damage they cause. But my grandmother had never believed in unnecessary weight. If something mattered, she made it precise. I unfolded the page slowly. The handwriting was hers. Clean, slightly angled, no hesitation in the lines. Camille, if you're reading this, it means your mother moved faster than she should have. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. She knew. And of course she knew. I kept reading. You are not to argue with her directly. Not at first. She is most dangerous when she thinks she is still in control of the story. My lips pressed together. That wasn't advice, that was instruction. There is a formal will. It is not kept here. It is deposited where it cannot be misplaced. You will find reference to it in the documents below. My eyes flicked down to the folders in the box. She had built layers. I felt something almost like pride cut through the tension in my chest. My grandmother had never been dramatic, but she had always been prepared. You may be told many things in the coming days, about necessity, about cost, about what is practical. You will notice these arguments avoid one thing: documentation. That line made me smile, just barely. She knew exactly how my mother operated. Yes, you are capable of seeing what others miss. Use that. Do not rush. Do not react. Verify everything before you speak. I leaned back slightly against the closet frame, the wood cool against my shoulder. Verify everything before you speak. That had been my entire career in one sentence. At the bottom, her signature, no flourish, just Eleanor Vale, and under it, one more line. The house is not the asset. The structure is. I read that twice. The house is not the asset. The structure is. That was deliberate. Not poetic, not sentimental, specific, structure, legal structure, ownership structure, financial structure. I folded the letter carefully and set it beside me on the carpet. Then I reached for the first folder, successor materials. Inside were copies, not originals. My grandmother never kept originals where they could be easily taken. But copies were enough to tell me where to look. Trust documents, amendments, appointment clauses. My eyes move faster now, trained by years of sorting signal from noise. The trust had a name I didn't recognize. Vale Agricultural Preservation Trust. I frowned. That wasn't the name my mother had used when she spoke about the estate to friends over the years. She always said the house and the property, mother's assets, never trust, never preservation. I flipped to the next page. There it was, a clause referencing the primary parcel, the estate grounds, not as a personal asset, as trust-held land. My pulse shifted again. That changed everything. If the property was held in trust, then it wasn't simply inherited the way my mother was pretending. It was governed, controlled, restricted, and more importantly, it wasn't freely sellable. Not without satisfying conditions. I kept going. Successor trustee designation. My eyes stopped, then moved back up to confirm. No mistake. My name was there. Primary successor trustee, Camille Ashford Vale. Not my mother, not Richard, me. I sat very still for a few seconds, not because I was surprised, because I was calculating. If this was accurate, and it felt accurate in the way only my grandmother's paperwork ever did, then my mother wasn't just moving fast, she was moving illegally, or at the very least, recklessly enough that it would become illegal the moment it was challenged. I flipped deeper into the file. Conditions, restrictions, usage provisions. My grandmother had written them tightly. No vague language, no room for interpretation. The land was to remain intact, subdivision prohibited, sale restricted unless specific criteria were met, and those criteria required trustee authorization. My authorization, I let out a slow breath. So that was the game. My mother wasn't selling something she owned. She was trying to sell something she controlled temporarily, hoping no one would check the structure before the deal closed. That explained the urgency. That explained the developers. That explained the pressure. And it explained the line she used earlier. You don't understand what it costs to maintain a place like this. That wasn't concern. That was framing. I reached for the second folder. Correspondence S. Hale. Inside were printed emails, law firm letterhead, Hale and Brenner Estate Counsel. I recognized the name vaguely. Old firm. Quiet reputation. The kind of firm wealthy families used when they didn't want noise. The emails were dated. Recent. Too recent. My eyes scanned quickly. Initial outreach from my mother. Inquiry about estate handling. A response requesting documentation. A follow-up asking for confirmation of trustee status. And then nothing. No reply from my mother. No completed engagement. No signed authorization, which meant she had contacted a legitimate firm and then backed off when they asked the question she didn't want to answer. I leaned back again, staring at the wall. That was sloppy. Not careless. My mother wasn't careless, but rushed. Rushed people leave trails, and trails are what I follow. I checked the timestamp on the last email. 5 days before my grandmother died. Again, before, not after. This hadn't been triggered by grief. This had been planned while Eleanor was still alive. A quiet anger moved through me then. That not explosive, not loud, cold, measured, the kind that doesn't burn out. I reached for the final item in the box. The rest of the folders, bank summaries, property tax records, maintenance accounts, everything structured cleanly under the trust, everything controlled, everything traceable. My grandmother hadn't left chaos behind. She'd left a system, and someone was trying to bypass it. I closed the folder and sat there for a moment, letting all of it settle into place. Then I stood up, because sitting with information is only useful for so long. Eventually, you have to move. I grabbed my phone and my keys. On my way out of the room, I paused just long enough to look back at the box, at the folders, at the envelope. Then I closed the closet door. Not to hide it, to mark it, this wasn't over. But this was just the part where they still thought it was. The county building smelled like paper and air conditioning that had been running too long. The kind of place where things become official, whether you're ready for them to or not. I walked in with a calm that didn't match the situation on the surface, but underneath, everything was aligned. purpose does that? At the front desk, a clerk glanced up at me over her glasses. Can I help you? Yes, I said. I need to check the filing status of an estate. She nodded toward the terminals. You can search there. I already did, I said. It's not in the system. That made her look at me again. Name? Eleanor Vale. She typed, waited, then frowned slightly. Nothing filed yet. I know, I said. I need to confirm whether any documents have been submitted but not processed. That changed her posture just enough. Hold on. She picked up the phone, spoke quietly, listened, then hung up and gestured toward a side counter. Someone will come out. I stepped aside and waited. The room was quiet except for the low hum of printers and the occasional shuffle of paper. People underestimate places like this. They think power lives in boardrooms and offices with glass walls. But real control, it lives in records, time-stamped, indexed, stored. 10 minutes later, a woman in her 40s came through a back door. Sharp eyes, no-nonsense posture. She looked at me like she had already decided I wasn't here to waste her time. Miss Vale? Yes. What do you need? I need to know if anything has been submitted under Eleanor Vale that hasn't been processed yet. She studied my face for a second, then nodded once. Come with me. We stepped into a quieter area behind the counter. She logged into a different system, not public. Her fingers moved quickly. Then she paused, scrolled, paused again, that same kind of pause I'd learned to recognize in my own work. The moment someone finds something they weren't expecting. Okay, she said slowly. There is something here. My attention sharpened. What is it? Partial submission, she said. Not complete. Submitted by who? She clicked again, then looked at me. Margaret Vale, my mother, of course. What kind of submission? Preliminary estate filing, she said. Missing supporting documentation. Which meant it hadn't gone through, which meant it wasn't valid, which meant everything she was doing right now was built on nothing. I nodded once. Has anything else been submitted? The clerk hesitated, then clicked into another tab, another pause. Then she leaned back slightly. That's interesting. What is? There's a document flagged, she said, but it's not attached to the estate filing. What kind of document? She looked at the screen, then back at me. Deposited will record. My chest tightened. Deposited where? In our secure archive system, she said. My grandmother's words echoed in my head. It is deposited where it cannot be misplaced. I kept my voice even. Can I access it? She studied me for a moment. Mike, what's your relationship to Eleanor Vale? Granddaughter? And Margaret Vale is? My mother. That seemed to settle something for her. She nodded once. Wait here. She disappeared through the back. I stood there, hands relaxed at my sides, breathing slow. Not because I was calm, because calm is a tool. A few minutes later, she came back with a thin folder. Not thick, not dramatic, just enough. She placed it on the counter. This is a certified copy of what's on file, she said. It hasn't been formally entered into probate yet. I nodded. Understood. My fingers rested on the edge of the folder for a second before I opened it. The first page was exactly what I expected. Last will and testament, Eleanor Vale. My eyes moved quickly. Legal description of the property. Precise, detailed, unmistakable. Then the section that mattered. Disposition of assets, the estate grounds, the primary parcel. My breathing slowed even further. And then, there it was, clear, direct, unambiguous. The property was not left to my mother. It was placed under the trust. And the trust was under my control, not shared, not conditional on my mother's approval. Mine. I turned the page, executor designation, my name, again. No confusion, no ambiguity. My grandmother hadn't left room for interpretation. She had closed the door completely. Behind me, the building hummed quietly. Paper moved, phones rang, life went on. But for me, everything had shifted. Because now I wasn't questioning anymore. I wasn't reacting, I wasn't guessing, I knew. And once you know, the entire game changes. I closed the folder slowly, looked up at the clerk. Can I get a certified copy of this? She nodded. I'll prepare it. As she walked away, I stood there holding the edge of the counter, feeling something settle into place that hadn't been there before. Not relief, not yet, control. And somewhere across town, my mother was probably still smiling, still confident, still believing she was ahead of me. She wasn't. She was just early. And early doesn't win. Not when the structure is already built, not when the paperwork exists, not when someone like me is willing to follow it all the way through. I glanced down at the will one more time, then closed it. Because the next step wasn't reading anymore, it was action. And I already knew exactly where I was going next. I didn't go back to the house. That was the first decision that mattered. If I walked back in with that will in my hands, my mother would shift immediately. She'd cry if it helped her, deny if that worked better, redirect, distract, delay. She'd turn it into a conversation instead of what it needed to be, a record. And I wasn't interested in conversation anymore. I stepped out of the county building into the late afternoon heat, the pavement radiating warmth through the soles of my shoes. The sky had gone that pale, stretched blue it gets before evening, and for a second everything looked deceptively calm. Then my phone buzzed, 3 missed calls, 1 voicemail, all from my mother. I didn't listen to it. Instead, I opened a new contact and typed in the name from the correspondence folder. S. Hale, Hale and Brenner Estate Council. I hit call. It rang twice before someone answered. Hale and Brenner. My name is Camille Vale, I said. Now, I need to speak with someone regarding an unfiled estate matter connected to Eleanor Vale. There was a brief pause. Hold, please. The line clicked. Soft instrumental music filled the silence. Something generic and neutral, the kind of sound designed to make people wait without thinking. I didn't need long. Within 30 seconds, the music cut. This is Samuel Hale. His voice was measured, controlled, not warm but not cold either. The kind of voice that doesn't waste time. Mr. Hale, I said, I believe my mother contacted your firm last week regarding my grandmother's estate. Another pause. Margaret Vale? Yes. I remember the inquiry, he said carefully. However, we did not proceed. I saw the correspondence, I replied. I also have a certified copy of the deposited will. That changed something. As I heard it in the way his breath shifted slightly before he spoke again. Where did you obtain that? From the county archive, I said. It hasn't been filed into probate yet. Silence. Not confusion. Recognition. You're listed as successor trustee, he said. Yes. An executor. Yes. Another pause. Then quieter now, more direct. Then you're the only person who should be making decisions about that property. Exactly. I leaned slightly against the side of my car, the metal warm against my arm. My mother has already initiated contact with developers, I said. There's also a preliminary estate submission under her name that's incomplete. That would not grant her authority, he said immediately. I know. Has anything been signed? Not that I've seen, I said. Okay, but she's moving quickly, and you're calling before she can finish. Yes. There was a brief silence. Then something in his tone shifted, not softer but sharper. Good. That was the first moment I knew I'd called the right person. I need to file the will, I said. Open probate, and I need to prevent any attempt to transfer, subdivide, or encumber the property. You're going to need immediate filings, he said. Petition for probate, notice of trust authority, and a recorded notice to flag the property. I'm at the county building now. Stay there. I didn't hesitate. I am. Give me 30 minutes, he said. I'll send documents directly to you. You'll need to print and file them today. Understood. And Camille, it was the first time he used my first name. Yes? If your mother has already contacted developers, let's assume she's trying to create momentum. People like that rely on speed. I've noticed. Then we slow everything down, he said. Legally. I smiled slightly. That's exactly what I was planning. Good, he said. Check your email. The call ended. I didn't move for a second. Then I pushed off the car and walked back inside. The public kiosk printer was slow, painfully slow. Each page came out with a soft mechanical whine, like it resented urgency. I stood there watching the stack build. Petition for probate, trust authority notice, notice of pending action. Each document clean, precise, structured the way my grandmother would have approved of. No wasted language, no ambiguity, just control. My phone buzzed again, a text this time, from my mother. If you don't answer me right now, I'm coming back to the house. I stared at the message. And then I typed back, don't. I didn't explain. Didn't soften it. Didn't add anything. Just one word. Then I locked the phone and picked up the papers. The clerk at the probate window looked up as I approached. Same building, different counter, different outcome. I need to file an estate petition, I said. She reached for the documents automatically. Name of decedent? Eleanor Vale. She started typing, then paused. Nothing is open yet, she said. I know, I replied. That's why I'm here. She nodded and began reviewing the paperwork. Her eyes moved faster as she flipped through the pages. Then she stopped, looked up at me. You're listed as executor. Yes. And trustee. Yes. She studied me for half a second. Then something in her posture shifted. Not personal, just procedural. Respect for the paperwork. All right, she said. Oh, let's get this file. That word, file, landed differently now, like a door locking behind me. I signed where she indicated, initialed, dated, paid the filing fee without looking at the total. Money wasn't the issue, time was. She stamped the documents, each one marked with the same final sound. Authority. Case number will be assigned within the hour, she said. I'll wait. She nodded. Have a seat. I didn't sit. I stood near the wall, papers in hand, watching the room. People came and went, arguments whispered under breath. A man pacing while reading something over and over again. A woman crying quietly into a tissue. This place processed endings, but today it was starting something. For me, for them. 23 minutes later, my name was called. I stepped forward. The clerk handed me a sheet, fresh, stamped, official. Case number at the top, estate of Eleanor Vale. I felt something settle into place so clean it almost felt like relief. Not emotional, structural. This was real now, recognized, recorded, untouchable without consequence. Next step? I asked. You can record notice with the county recorder, she said. Flag the property. I'm doing that now. She nodded once. Good. Back at the recorder's desk, the same woman from earlier looked up as I approached. You're back. I am. I placed the documents in front of her. I need to record these against the property immediately. She scanned the first page, then the second. Her eyes flicked to me briefly. You opened probate? Yes. And you're the trustee? Yes. That was all she needed. Give me 10 minutes, she said. I stepped aside again, watched the process. Watched her input the parcel number, watched her attach the notices, watched the system accept it. That was the moment everything changed, not emotionally, legally, because once those notices were recorded, the property wasn't clean anymore. It was flagged, disputed, frozen in place, exactly where I needed it. She came back with the stamped receipts, instrument numbers printed across the top. Done, she said. I took them, ran my thumb lightly over the ink. Still slightly raised, fresh, permanent. Anyone checking title will see it, she added. Good. I stepped away from the counter and pulled out my phone. Scrolled back to the number on the paper my mother had shoved at me earlier. The development contact. I hit call. It rang once, twice, then picked up. Westbridge Development. My name is Camille Vale, I said. I'm calling regarding the Vale Estate property. A pause, then a shift in tone. Yes? I'm informing you that the property is now under active probate, I said. A will has been filed. I am the named trustee and executor. A notice of pending action has been recorded against the parcel as of this afternoon. Silence. Then, I'll need to transfer you. Of course. Another click. A different voice, more controlled. This is Daniel Price, legal counsel for Westbridge. Mr. Price, I said evenly, your firm was given incorrect authority regarding that property. Your mother does not have the legal authority to sell or negotiate the property, I said. The trust structure prohibits it without trustee authorization, which she does not have. Silence, longer this time. Then, if what you're saying is accurate, it is, I said. As another pause, then his voice shifted, subtly, but enough. We will suspend all activity pending verification. Good, I said, because any further action would be taken with notice of dispute. That landed, I could feel it. I understand, he said. The call ended. I lowered the phone slowly, and for the first time that day, I let myself exhale. Not because it was over, because it had started. By the time I pulled into the long gravel drive that evening, the light had gone soft and gold across the property. The house looked exactly the same, still, quiet, like nothing had happened. But everything had. My mother's car was already there. Of course it was. I stepped out, closed the door gently, and walked toward the house. No rush, no hesitation. The front door opened before I reached it. She was waiting, arms crossed, face composed. Yes, but her eyes were different now, tighter, more focused. She knew something had shifted. You didn't answer your phone, she said. I was busy. Doing what? I held her gaze. Fixing your mistake. That hit, harder than anything I'd said earlier. Her jaw tightened. What did you do? I didn't answer right away. I stepped past her into the foyer, set my folder down on the table, then turned back to her. Tell me something first, I said. Her expression sharpened. What? Why did you rush? She blinked, just once, and that was enough. Excuse me? You started development inquiries before she died, I said. You contacted lawyers, then backed off. You brought buyers onto the property before probate. Why? Her face went completely still, which was answer enough, but I wanted to hear it. Like, I don't need to justify. You do if you expect me to stay quiet. That did it. Her composure cracked just enough for something real to slip through. Not guilt, pressure. You don't understand the situation, she said. Then explain it. She hesitated. And that hesitation told me everything, because my mother never hesitated unless she was deciding which version of the truth to use. There are obligations, she said carefully. Financial ones? She didn't answer. I stepped closer. How much? Camille, how much? Her voice dropped. More than you think. That wasn't a number. That was fear. And suddenly the entire picture shifted again. This wasn't just greed. This was urgency, debt, leverage, something pressing hard enough that she was willing to risk everything. I nodded slowly. That explains the timing. Her eyes snapped back to mine. What did you do? This time I answered. I filed the will. Silence. Real silence. Then, you what? I opened probate, I said, and I recorded notice against the property. Her face drained of color, not completely, just enough. That's not possible, she said. It is. You don't have the authority. I do, I said, and I let that sit there, heavy, undeniable. Her breathing changed, small, tight. You're lying. I shook my head once. No. She stared at me, searching, calculating, trying to find the angle where this wasn't real. There's no will, she said finally, and that was it. That was the moment, because she said it too fast, too firmly, like she needed it to be true. I reached into the folder, pulled out the certified copy, and placed it on the table between us. The paper made a soft sound as it hit the wood, but it might as well have been thunder. Her eyes dropped to it, then back to me, then slowly, back down again. She didn't touch it, didn't move, just stared. And for the first time in my life, my mother looked unsure. I tilted my head slightly. You already saw it, I said quietly. That snapped her gaze back to mine. What? You accessed it yesterday, I said, at the county archive. Her lips parted, just slightly, and in that small break in her control, I saw it, not confusion, not shock, recognition. She knew, she had known, and she did it anyway. I leaned in just enough for my voice to drop. You read it? I said, and you still tried to sell the property. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but nothing came out. And that silence? And that was the moment she realized something she hadn't planned for. She hadn't lost control earlier. She'd just been early, now. Now she was behind, and for someone like my mother, that was the most dangerous position she could be in. I straightened, picked up the folder, and stepped back. This isn't a conversation anymore, I said. Her voice came out sharp. You don't get to do this. I met her gaze one last time. I already did. And then I walked past her, leaving her standing in the foyer, alone, with the truth, and for the first time, without control. The next morning started before sunrise, not because I couldn't sleep, because I didn't need to. There's a certain kind of clarity that comes after a line has been crossed. No second guessing, no emotional loops, just direction. By the time the sky started to lighten, and I was already dressed, coffee in hand, standing at the edge of the back terrace, looking out over the property, the air was cool, damp. The grass still held that early morning sheen that disappears the second the sun fully rises. For a moment, everything looked exactly like it always had, unchanged. But that's the thing about structures. They don't show damage immediately. They reveal it when pressure is applied, and pressure was coming, right on schedule. At 7:18 a.m., I heard the first truck, low engine, gravel crunch, followed by another, and then a sheriff's vehicle. I didn't turn right away. I just stood there, watching the line of trees at the edge of the drive as the vehicles came into view. 3 trucks, one marked SUV. My mother hadn't been bluffing. Of course she hadn't. She didn't bluff. She staged. As I took one slow sip of coffee, then set the cup down on the stone railing and walked inside. By the time I reached the front foyer, the first knock hit the door. Firm, official. I opened it. A uniformed deputy stood on the other side, mid-40s, calm eyes, neutral expression. The kind of man who had stepped into enough family conflicts to know not to assume anything too quickly. "Ma'am," he said, "are you Camille Vale?" "Yes." "Deputy Harris," he said, nodding. "We received a complaint regarding unauthorized presence on this property." Of course they did. I stepped back slightly, opening the door wider. "Come in." He hesitated just enough to register that I wasn't reacting the way he expected. Then he stepped inside. Behind him, I could see the survey crew unloading equipment, bright vests, tripods, stakes. And just beyond them, my mother, standing near the front drive, arms folded, watching, waiting. I looked back at the deputy. "Before we go any further," I said calmly, "I'd like you to review something." His posture stayed neutral. "What's that?" I walked to the entry table, picked up the folder I'd left there, and handed him the top document, certified, stamped, official. He took it, read, then flipped to the next page, and the next. His eyes slowed slightly as he processed it. "What is this?" he asked. "Estate filing," I said. "Opened yesterday. I am the appointed executor and trustee of the property." He glanced back at the page, then at me. "Your mother claims she has authority if she doesn't," I said. No hesitation, no explanation, just fact. He looked at the document again, then toward the open door, then back at me. "Do you have anything showing the property status?" he asked. I handed him the recorder receipt, instrument number, timestamp. He scanned it, and I watched the exact moment it clicked. Not the legal nuance, just the reality. There was a dispute, a recorded one, which meant this wasn't a simple trespass call anymore. This was something else. He handed the papers back, then stepped toward the door. "Hold on," he said. He walked outside, spoke briefly into his radio, then turned toward the survey crew. "Everyone hold for a minute." That shifted the entire scene. The crew paused, equipment half unloaded, conversation cut short. My mother's posture tightened slightly. I stepped out onto the front porch, not rushing, not reacting, just present. The deputy turned back toward me. "Ma'am, this is now a civil dispute with active filings," he said. "No, yes. I'm not removing you from the property. I'm not asking you to." He nodded once, then turned toward my mother. "Ma'am," he called. She walked forward, controlled, composed, still performing. "Yes, officer," she said. "You filed the complaint?" "Yes." "She's refusing to leave property that is under contract." He gestured slightly with the papers in his hand. "There's an active probate case and recorded notice disputing ownership," he said. "That changes the situation." Her smile didn't disappear, but it hardened. "That's not valid," she said. "She doesn't have authority to—" The deputy cut her off. "I'm not here to determine that," he said evenly. "I'm here to make sure nothing escalates." That was the second shift. Subtle, but real. Because now she wasn't directing the situation anymore. She was being managed. And Richard stepped forward then, voice already rising. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "We have a signed agreement." "With who?" the deputy asked. Richard hesitated, just long enough, then, "A buyer." "Is it recorded?" the deputy asked. "No, but—" "Then it's not enforceable at this level," he said. "Not with a dispute in place." Richard's face flushed. "You can't just let her stay here?" "I can," the deputy said, "because right now, legally, neither of you has clear authority without court determination." That was it. That was the moment everything tipped. Because my mother wasn't used to being neutralized, she was used to controlling the frame. And now, she didn't have one. Her voice came out sharper. "She's manipulating this," she said. "She went behind our back." I spoke before she could finish. "I filed the will," I said. "Like the one you accessed yesterday." Silence, immediate, heavy. The deputy's head turned slightly. "Accessed?" I held his gaze. "The deposited will record shows she viewed it yesterday morning," I said, "before initiating the sale process." His expression didn't change much, but something in it sharpened. "Is that accurate?" he asked my mother. She didn't answer right away, which was all the answer he needed. "I see," he said. He didn't push further. Didn't need to. He turned back toward the crew. "Pack it up," he said. "No work is being done here today." The crew chief didn't argue, didn't question. He just nodded and started giving instructions. Because people like that don't get paid enough to step into legal messes, they just leave. My mother stepped forward. Yao, you can't just shut this down. I'm not shutting anything down, the deputy said. I'm preventing escalation. Richard swore under his breath. My mother didn't. She just stood there, watching, calculating, trying to find the angle, but there wasn't one. Not here, not now. The deputy turned back to me. If anything else happens, you call us, he said. I will. He nodded once, then walked back to his vehicle. The engine started, gravel shifted, and just like that, the scene dissolved. Trucks pulling out, equipment being loaded, the illusion collapsing. I stood there, hands relaxed at my sides, watching it all unwind, not satisfied, not yet. Just steady. My mother didn't move, not until the last truck cleared the drive. Then she turned to me, slowly, carefully, and for the first time since this started, she wasn't smiling. You think this is over? She asked. I met her gaze. No, she stepped closer. You have no idea what you've just done. I do, I said. Her voice dropped. You've made this public. That was the point. Her jaw tightened. You've embarrassed us. No, I said. You did that yourself. That landed hard. Richard stepped in again, but his voice had lost something. Edge, confidence. You're going to regret this, he said. I looked at him, really looked. And for the first time, I saw it. Not control, not power. Fear, not loud, not obvious. But there, because people like Richard don't understand systems. They understand leverage. And right now, he didn't have any. I turned back to my mother. This isn't about embarrassment, I said. It's about authority. She said nothing. I took one step closer. Ned, you tried to sell something you don't control, I said. You knew you didn't control it. Her eyes flickered just once. You read the will, I continued. You saw my name, and you did it anyway. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Still no denial. That was important, because silence like that, it's not confusion, it's calculation. I straightened. This is going to court, I said. She exhaled slowly, then smiled again. But it was different now, tighter, sharper, more dangerous. You think paperwork wins everything, she said. I shook my head slightly. No, I said. Just the things that matter. That was the end of the conversation. For now, because what came next wasn't going to happen on a front lawn. It was going to happen in a courtroom, where structure matters more than performance, and where people like my mother don't get to control the narrative. 3 days later, we were standing in exactly that place. No roses, no sunlight, no performance, just wood, paper, and consequences waiting to be assigned. Courtrooms don't feel dramatic when you're actually in them. That's something people don't understand. There's no swelling music, no theatrical pauses, no perfectly timed speeches that shift everything in a single moment. It's quieter than that, more procedural, more final. The room was colder than I expected, not in temperature, though the air conditioning was aggressive, but in tone. Everything in it was designed to remove emotion from the equation. Polished wood, neutral walls, fluorescent light that flattened everything into the same shade of reality. I sat at the table beside Samuel Hale, with my hands folded loosely in front of me, the file open but untouched. Across the aisle, my mother sat with her attorney, Richard beside her. Neither of them looked at me. That was new. My mother had always been someone who met conflict head-on if she thought she could control it. She liked eye contact, used it like a tool. Now, she was focused straight ahead, composed but contained. That told me everything I needed to know. The judge entered without ceremony. We stood, sat, and it began. No introductions beyond what was necessary, no wasted language, just facts. Samuel started, clean, direct. Your Honor, we are here regarding the estate of Eleanor Vale, specifically the improper attempt to transfer and market trust-held property without authority. No embellishment, no dramatics, just structure. The judge nodded once. And proceed. Samuel laid it out piece by piece. The trust, the will, my appointment as executor and trustee, the restrictions on sale, the timeline, and then the part that mattered most. The opposing party accessed the deposited will record prior to initiating the attempted transfer, he said, and subsequently submitted documentation asserting that no will existed. That landed, quietly, but heavily. The judge's eyes shifted to my mother, not accusatory, not emotional, just attentive. Is that accurate? He he asked. My mother's attorney spoke before she could. Your Honor, there was confusion regarding the status of the will. Samuel didn't interrupt. He waited, then placed a document on the table. The access log, he said, stamped, timed, clear, and beneath it, the receipt, payment record, her name, her signature, date, time, no room, and no interpretation. The judge picked it up, read, set it down, then leaned back slightly in his chair. Mrs. Vale, he said. My mother finally looked up. Yes, Your Honor. You accessed this document the day before submitting a statement claiming it did not exist? Silence. Not long, but long enough. Her attorney started to speak again. Your Honor, my client. The judge raised a hand, just slightly. Enough. I asked her, he said. The room went still. My mother inhaled, exhaled, then, yes. No explanation, no spin, just yes. And that was it. That was the moment, because everything after that was just consequence. The judge nodded once, not surprised, not reactive, just done. He looked down at the file again, then back up. The property is clearly governed by trust structure, he said. If the appointed trustee is present and has taken appropriate legal steps to establish authority, he turned his attention briefly to Richard. And you, he said, were acting under the assumption that authority existed where it did not. Richard didn't answer. Couldn't, because there was nothing left to say. The judge continued. The attempted transfer is invalid, he said. The property remains under the control of the trust and its appointed trustee. That was the first closure, structural, clean, final, but he didn't stop there. Additionally, he said, the submitted documentation contains statements that are directly contradicted by recorded evidence. He glanced once more at the receipt, then at the access log, then back at my mother. That matter will be referred for further review. Not loud, not aggressive, but definitive. But my mother didn't move, didn't react, but I saw it. In the slight tightening of her shoulders, in the way her hand curled just slightly against the table, the realization, not that she had lost, that she had crossed into something she couldn't talk her way out of. The hearing ended shortly after. No theatrics, no raised voices, just rulings, recorded, stamped, done. Outside, the air felt different, warmer, real again. I stood at the top of the courthouse steps for a moment, the sunlight hitting my face, the noise of the street settling back into place around me. Samuel stepped beside me. It's finished, he said. Not entirely, I replied. He gave a small nod. No, he said, but the important part is. I looked out at the city for a second, cars moving, people walking, life continuing without any awareness of what had just shifted. Thank you, I said. He adjusted his jacket slightly. You did most of it, he said. You just did it correctly. That was the highest compliment someone like him would give. Then he left. No lingering, no unnecessary words, just gone. I stayed a moment longer, then turned and walked down the steps. The house felt different when I got back, not because anything had changed physically, because it was quiet. Not tense quiet, not waiting quiet, just still. Richard was gone. His things cleared out faster than I expected. People like him don't stay where they've lost leverage. My mother remained, but she kept her distance. We passed each other once in the hallway. No words, just a brief moment of eye contact. There was no apology there, no regret. But there was something else, recognition. She understood now, not emotionally, structurally. She had miscalculated, and I had corrected it. That was the new balance. We didn't need to say anything, because everything that mattered had already been said in a courtroom. The months that followed were quiet. Deliberately, I finalized the trust structure, reinforced the restrictions, added layers my grandmother would have approved of. No shortcuts, no assumptions, everything documented, everything controlled. The property stayed intact. The land remained untouched. The house felt like itself again, not because the past had been restored, but because the pressure was gone. One evening, late summer, I stood out by the edge of the orchard. The sun low, the air warm, the trees casting long shadows across the grass. The same place I used to stand when I was younger. Listening to my grandmother explain how everything worth keeping requires maintenance. Not constant attention, just awareness. I understood that now, in a way I hadn't before. This wasn't about winning. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about control, not over people, over structure, over truth, over what gets recorded and what doesn't. I looked out over the land one more time, then turned back toward the house. Not as a guest, not as someone passing through, but as someone who understood exactly what it was and what it required. And this time, I didn't feel like I was protecting something fragile. I felt like I was standing on something that had already been built to last. End of story.